What's good, YouTube? It's Rico here, and I've got two deck profiles tonight so far. I might do one more, actually, just because, like I said in my Zephyr video, I have so many ideas running around in my head that, like, I just really like them, and I really just want to post them, especially because, like, the builds I'm coming up with for this format are not really, like, the standard builds that I feel like a lot of people are agreeing on, and, like, card choices that I'm seeing, just that are, like, widespread for these decks. So on that note, this is a deck profile for Magician, but it's a really, really unorthodox build. I call it Supreme King Magician just because it's like definitely more focused on that engine. And it's very OCG inspired, just because when Electromite and like all the Rain stuff came out in the OCG, Supreme King Magician was like the one build that caught my eye, and I really liked all the idea behind it, all this stuff. And like also over time, a lot of ideas I came up with for the deck ended up being used in the OCG. So I just think there's a lot of promise to it, even though like our lists are definitely like very different. They have double iris, we don't. They have one Skullcrobat Joker, we have zero, stuff like that, and like Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon stuff. But I still think it works really well. Like out of all the Magician like builds and card numbers and choices I've tried, this one feels like by far the most consistent. And honestly, if I were to take Magician to a regional, this would probably be the only way I would really want to play it. Everything else just feels clunky, awkward. Sometimes the hands just don't work out right. And like this one, it feels like everything's smooth, everything synergizes well, it all works together. And I really like it about this. So definitely, yeah, it's very, very consistent for sure. I don't know how well it handles disruption, but I have some contingency plans I could think of. So I'll have to test it to find out. But here's the deck. So first off, all the sorcerer stuff: Astrograph Sorcerer, Chronograph Sorcerer, and then both of the Gazers, Stargazer and Time Gazer. So this was something like this is like definitely caught on and like everybody's doing it now. But I remember when Electromite was announced, and I was thinking, okay, what can we do to put stuff on the board for a pre-pendulum Electromite? And I thought, wait, Astrograph and Chronograph have those effects that summon Stargazer and Time Gazer, and I was just like, immediately, that's it. And like I was like, I swore by like, this is the answer. And I guess like early on in the OCG, I saw builds that weren't running it. They were running like the Dracos with Draco face off. I was like, why are you relying on a limited card? But it's caught on. OCG's using it. Everybody, TCG is using it. Definitely is a really amazing engine. Astrograph is probably the best card in the game right now. Or best monster non-hand trap in the game right now. With the absence of Max C, Astrograph is the new god card. Yeah, I would say Astrograph is probably better than Ash right now, just because Ash does have a couple matchups where she's not super great, and Astrograph is just like, in most Pendulum decks, you want to play it. Actually, on that, there was one thing I forgot to say in my Zephyr deck profile, is that I wasn't playing Astrograph in that deck. And that's just because I feel like Astrograph in Zephyr actually, surprisingly, isn't that good. Because, like, 3 would be Cloggy, because Zephyrs don't really pop themselves, so you only want to ditch it with, like, the Electromite. So I was trying 1, but a lot of the times it just didn't come up, where, like, if I didn't already have Zephyrath, I wanted to dump Zephyrath and then pop Oracle of Zephyra and put that in my hand to continue my play. So I'd only play Astrograph if I had like everything else I wanted. But like, not only did that not always happen, but then like the Astrograph usually ended up just sitting there dead. So I was like, okay, it's a 2500 beat stick. I could have sent something else and maybe made a bigger play. And the other thing is that in Zephyra, a lot of the times the thing I'm popping is not a Pendulum monster, it's a field spell, so I don't get a search off of Astrograph and I don't get a draw for Electromite. So it really just felt like dead weight, and that's why I didn't play Astrograph in that deck. I was explaining so much in that video that I just completely forgot to mention why I wasn't playing Astrograph. But in every other Pendulum deck, Astrograph is bloody amazing, so yeah, 3 of in like everything else, and by every other Pendulum deck, it's really just Magician and Metal Foes, so... Metal Foes will probably be the next video I make, by the way. So, yeah, that's the Sorcerer engine. So, for the Magicians, I'm playing an extremely small Magician package. I'm only playing Harmonizing, Purple Poison, and Black Fang. So, I'm not playing Wisdom Eye Magician, and I'm not playing Oath Dragon Magician. There are a couple of reasons why I'm not playing Wisdom Eye Magician. One of them I'll get to later, but another one is just... I feel like Wisdom Eye really isn't as good without Skullcrobat Joker, because a lot of the good stuff was like Skullcrobat Joker tying everything together. You normal summon it, you grab Wisdom Eye to get whatever skill you want, you load your extra deck, and just all of this great stuff. But like, and so like it made stuff like Wisdom Eye Magician and Star Pendulum Graph just work that much better altogether. And then like Double Iris being able to search like Star Pendulum Graph or Time Pendulum Graph or whatever you need. Like losing Joker and Double Iris really hurt all that synergy that all the magicians had, I feel. So I feel like the Wisdom Eye Magicians really just aren't that great compared to other things I could play. And so I just ended up cutting them. That was one of the few reasons that I did that. And then because I wasn't playing the Wisdom Eyes, I decided not to play Oath Dragon, because I feel like Oath's biggest utility comes from like getting back Wisdom Eye. Because like if I'm not putting Wisdom Eye in the extra deck, then usually I'm not putting a Magician in the extra deck until like after a Pendulum Summon play anyway. So I didn't really feel like I needed Oath Dragon. Like the one big thing I liked about Oath Dragon was him being level 6 made it easier to make Norito. But I can do that with Chronograph Sorcerer anyway. Like I would pretty much have to hard draw either Wisdom Eye or Oath Dragon. But like if I draw a Chronograph, then like I can Chronograph and then Astrograph to search another Chronograph. So that was like my way to make Norito, honestly. So I don't know. Like I said, like I feel like without Joker and Double Iris, the Magicians don't really synergize as well as they did, and it's to the point where like I'd rather just like. So the reason, I guess, aside from the fact that these are like the good Magicians, Harmonizing is the best one because it by itself is a Synchro or Xyz or Link play when you Pendulum Summon it, so it can do stuff on its own, as provided you also have scales, obviously. And then Purple Poison and Black Fang are just really good utility, because Black Fang can revive like any of the Magicians, any of the Sorcerers, and then Purple Poison is just like attack boosting and like killing things. So I went for the ones that had like the most generic utility, along with Harmonizing, because she's still like super amazing. So yeah. Also, like, this is very similar. Like I said, my build's very OCG inspired. In the OCG, the only Magicians that the Supreme King build runs are 3 Harmonizing, 3 Purple Poison, and 3 Double Iris. So I just put Black Fang in place of Double Iris. So yeah. And then the Supreme King engine is, surprisingly enough, 3 Dark Worms and 3 Gate Zeros. Gate Zero is amazing. I understand why builds only play 2, especially like the builds that still play Wisdom Eye Magician and Oath Dragon and aren't as focused on Dark Worm. I can see why they play 2, but Gate Zero is still awesome enough of a card that I would never ever play only 1, because there's so many things you can do with 2 copies. Because like you can Pendulum Summon it to make Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. You can pop it with Astrograph and search the other one. Like, I would never play less than 2, but I definitely love 3. And I remember there was another Pojo user, Harvey1997. He got first place at a regional with his Magician deck. I guess I can post a link to that in the description, because you should check that out, because he did awesome with that deck. But he said he played 2 Gates, and he said if he had the space, he would have played 3. So, yeah, Gates, awesome. And Dark Worm, like, if you want my opinion, Dark Worm right next to Astrograph is the best monster in the deck. Like, it's Astrograph and then it's Dark Worm. Because, like, you dump him, he's a free special summon. If you dump him, he searches out Gate Zero, so that's low scale. If you're really desperate, you can set him in scale and he's a monkey board, but that hopefully never comes up. But it's there, and, like, every monster in the deck is dark because I don't play Wisdom Eye, so that's actually, like, not a downside if I have to do that. There's just so much Dark Worm does for the deck, and that's why I feel like the best way to play this deck is to focus on Dark Worm, because he's like, with Skullcrobat gone, he is the only good normal summon in the deck. Like, you don't really want to normal summon any of the Magicians unless you're doing it to complement another summon so you can make Electromite. But Dark Worm on his own is like a good normal summon. So, like, I think builds should focus on Dark Worm. That's why I built it this way, to focus on the Supreme Kings instead of the Magicians, because the Magicians are kind of, they definitely still have the utility, but they're not really as fluid without Joker and Iris. But Supreme King Dragon Dark Worm is just a really strong card. So, and then last monsters is Ash Blossom. As I explained in the Zephyr video, I feel Ash Blossom is the most versatile of the hand traps right now, even though it's not the best in the Magician matchup. It still has enough utility where I would play it in the main over Veiler or Ogre, but depending on like what local meta is, you could switch it with any of them because they all have like utility and are really good in certain matchups and then really not as good in others. Like for me, my local is primarily Lightsworn, and then there's like a couple like probably a few magicians will be running around. There's a couple like Burning Abyss. There might be some Trick Stars and like that. Like my local's like a pish posh of like everything, but there's like a huge focus on like Lightsworn and Fairy Tail Snow decks. So like Ash would be really helpful there. If it was like mostly Pendulum stuff, I'd probably be maining Ghost Ogre. So just like examples like that. But yeah, going into a regional, I would main Ash just because the most versatile one. So that's all the monsters. Spell lineup. This is where it gets crazy. So I still played Pot of Desires. So I feel like this card really is not detrimental to the deck. Like even still, because like most of my cards I play in threes. The only ones I don't want to banish under any circumstance are Stargazer and Time Gazer because they make Chronograph and Astrograph not live. But I view it in a similar light to like Burning Abyss playing Desires, despite the fact that you don't want to banish Tour Guide or Graph, and especially not Seer. You never want to banish Seer. But it's like the chances of you banishing the one, like that one of, are low enough to not really matter in the long run. And the deck, like, without Double Iris searching stuff, without Skullcrobat searching stuff, and, like, giving you free pluses, like, the deck really needs, like, something to keep up an advantage. That was the biggest problem I was hitting when I was, like, playtesting with my friend, was that, like, I would set up this great board, but if he broke it, I had nothing left. And I feel like Desires help you, like, maintain card advantage and, like, get you to your combos and stuff. And really, if you draw, like, Astrograph and Desires, for example, if you draw one of the Sorcerers and Desires, obviously you play the Sorcerer first to get the Gazer out of the deck, and then you Desires. Or if you draw Desires by itself, and then you play it and you draw into the Sorcerer but you banish the Gazer, well, either way you didn't have the play to summon it from the deck, so it doesn't really make a difference. And like nothing else in the deck I really mind banishing. One argument I see is that you don't want to banish anything because then you might hit 2 copies of something and then you won't be able to like search off of Astrograph. But like it's such a like unlikely scenario that it doesn't really bother me. And like after the first turn, you don't really need to do that searching, I feel. I could be wrong, but I definitely think Desires is still good and still worth using in the deck, especially because the deck needs to like maintain advantage. Because if they manage to break the board, like I've found that like I really don't know what to do. Or if they disrupt you. So I don't know. I still really like Desires. So I go hard on the dumping for Darkworm. I play 3 Shine and 1 Foolish Burial. The normal ratio is like 1-1 or like 2-1. If people are dumb, sometimes they do 2-0, but I don't know why you would ever play 2 Shrine over Shrine Foolish. But anyway. So, like I said, I feel like next to Astrograph Sorcerer, Darkworm is the best monster in the deck. And I want to see the best monster in the deck as often as I can. So, with these and the 3 Darkworms themselves, I run 7 ways to see them on the first turn. And, like, the downside of this is that, like, the extra copies become dead after the first one. But I'm willing to take that risk if it means I see Darkworm early. Like, I kind of see it in a similar light to Brilliant Fusion, where, like, you run 3 Brilliant Fusion, but after the first Brilliant Fusion, the rest of them are dead because you play 1 Seraphonite and 1 Garnet. So, it's kind of, like, similar. Like, I see these as 4 copies of Brilliant Fusion, and then the Darkworms are 3 Garnets that aren't actually Garnets, because nothing in this deck is actually a Garnet. Like, hard drawing the Gate is not bad either. So, it's, like, Brilliant Fusion, but less shitty. Brilliant Fusion is awesome. I love that card. So, like, it does suck if you see multiples per game, but it's not the worst. And honestly, I have no problem dumping more Darkworms into the graveyard, because if something happens, my opponent wipes my board, I have a Darkworm in graveyard to, like, keep going. So, yeah. I will say that if we had Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon, which is, like, the level 12 Pendulum that you pay 500 and discard it to add any level 8 or lower Dragon Pendulum to your hand, So like it would be essentially 3 more copies of Dark Worm. If we had that, I probably would not be playing 4 of these. I'd be doing the 1/1, because there would still be a bunch of ways to get to Dark Worm. But because we don't have that, I feel like the deck needs to have ways to get to Dark Worm, and this is like the best way to do it. Because I'm not going to run Ravine in this deck. It's not like Zephyr where it's a lenient and discarding. Discarding's bad in this deck. So, and here's the craziest thing. I'm seeing ratios for this debated everywhere, and it has to do with Duelist Alliance. So I've seen people talk about play 1 Duelist Alliance, play 2 Duelist Alliance, play no Duelist Alliance. I play 3 Duelist Alliance, and I play 3 Pendulum Call, and I play Time Pendulum Graph. So, this admittedly is an idea I stole from Patrick Hoban, because he posted a video a long time ago of like a Magician deck he played at ARG that was also Supreme King focused. Pendulum Call plus Dark Worm is really fucking good, because if they ash the Pendulum Call, you still have Dark Worm in the graveyard, and like even if you draw the Pendulum Call without the Dark Worm, there like you can, unless your hand is particularly awful, you can usually hold off on playing the Pendulum Call until you like really need to do it. So like you can set up and do the Electromite, the Astrograph, and everything, and if your opponent didn't ash by that point, they probably don't have it, so you can safely Pendulum Call. And even if they do, like wait for the Pendulum Call, which I don't think anybody would do because nobody's expecting this card right now. Like hopefully by that point you have enough where you can make a play anyway. So like, especially like in the wake of losing Joker, and not really so much losing Iris, because Iris didn't search other Pendulum monsters, but like, or search your Magicians. In the wake of losing Joker, I feel like Pendulum Call is actually really important, because like Star Pendulum Graph is like not super reliable without double Iris to search it, and like you want to be able to get to Harmonizing Magician, because this card is still really good. But like without Joker, you can't really search it, because popping it with the, like getting it with the Wisdom Eye doesn't do anything. So like you want to get to Harmonizing Magician, and I feel like the only really good way to do it is Pendulum Call. So like with Duelist Alliance and Pendulum Call, this is 6 ways to search Harmonizing Magician, so you're essentially running 9 copies of her. And this also like grabs whatever scales you need and just everything like that. And it's the reason why, like, even with the smaller Magician focus, I still play the 3/3 of Purple Poison and Black Fang, just so like I always have targets and whatever I need for Pendulum Call. Like, I think this card is insane, honestly. Like, it's like outside of Dark Worm, there's not really a good discard, but that I don't think that was ever really a problem. Like in the original Odd-Eyes Magician, you maxed out Pendulum Call despite the fact that you played exactly 1 card you wanted to discard, and that was Noble Dragon Magician. It's just that like it fixes your scales and searches what you need so well that it's just worth it. And then the protection of scales is also really helpful. And just like the biggest thing that kills this card is Ash. But considering the fact that some people are shaky on Ash because, like, oh, it's bad against Magician, except it's not really that bad against Magician. But, like, I feel like you can play around Ash, and if you play smartly with Pendulum Call, you can get through. Because you can bait Pendulum Call with, like, Astrograph, with, like, they might hit the Shrine, but, like, Pot of Desires, they'll Ash that if they have it, probably. Like, there are so many ways, I feel, to bait Ash that I feel like it's still worth playing Pendulum Call. And then, like, on the other note is, like, Time Pendulum Graph. This is the other thing. I still see people playing Time Pendulum Graph, which is good because this card is insane. But, like, people are like, oh, only 1 Duelist Alliance or 2 Duelist Alliance. But, like, Time Pendulum Graph is probably, like, top 3 best card in the deck. Like, there's a bunch of really good cards in the deck, but, like, this... It's really hard to play around this along with the other disruption that your opponent has. Like, when I was playtesting with my friend, he was like, man, this deck's a lot easier to deal with when there's no Time Pendulum Graph. And I was like, right? So, like, I still feel like before there was, like, 7 ways to search Time Pendulum Graph, because you had the Alliances to grab Iris, and then you had the Iris to grab Time Pendulum Graph. I still think you should run as many ways to get to Time Pendulum Graph as you can. And Duelist Alliance... lets you, so you're essentially, if you don't want it, you run 1 Time Pendulum Graph, but if you do want it, you got 4 Time Pendulum Graphs. So, like, like, ideally, in many cases, I play Duelist Alliance to grab Pendulum Call, but if I already have a setup and I don't need Pendulum Call, then I can grab Time Pendulum Graph instead and make my board even stronger than it already is. So, like, I still think Duelist Alliance is amazing. I feel like the reason people aren't caring for it is because they're focusing too much on grabbing scales. Because, like, they're like, oh, well, we can run Luster Pendulum and Vector Pendulum, but it's not as good. And I was like, well, clearly it's not. But if you just play around the Ash, you can Pendulum Call, and then get your skills that way with Duelist Alliance. And then, honestly, if you fail to play around the Ash, then sometimes it happens. Sometimes you just can't play around Ash, and that's just the facts of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think if this goes uninterrupted, it's fantastic, and I would definitely, I think this is the way to do it. And like, even like, you look at the OCG, they don't do Duelist Alliance, which I think is weird, but they also still have Double Iris, so it doesn't really matter. But they do play the one Pendulum Call that they're allowed to play. So, yeah. And like, I think OCG wise, the lack of Duelist Alliance is probably because their only targets would be Pendulum Call, Time Pendulum Graph, and the Double Iris. But here, like, we kind of need the Pendulum Call, and like, we have 3 Pendulum Calls, so Duelist Alliance is just even better in that regard. I'm rambling, but I think Pendulum Call is really good. I think Time Pendulum Graph should still be a big focus, and both of them link into Duelist Alliance. So I originally wasn't actually playing the Time Pendulum Graph because it's like, I don't want to really search it. I'd rather search Pendulum Call. But like, if you open them together, or if you just don't need Pendulum Call, it's good to have a second target. And honestly, Time Pendulum Graph is just really, really good. So. And that's the deck. It's 40 cards. Surprisingly, I managed to fit it into 40 cards. Extra deck is 2 Electromite cards, amazing. Decode Talker to do Vortex plays. I don't really think you need any other links. I was considering Underclock Taker just to play around Reaper, but I think there are probably better ways to play around Reaper, mainly just like, if they Reaper the Electromite, you just play the pre-spiral game of Magician, where you use 1 extra monster zone and you just beat things down like that, and like, that was a viable strategy, and it's still a viable strategy. So yeah, I don't really think anything else is needed. One thing I did consider was Zephyr Metaltron, just because it wouldn't point up and it would give you 3 things pointing down, but I feel like Decode Talker is overall better, because Decode Talker is a better monster, it's a bigger monster, and if something happens to the Electromites, you probably won't be able to make Zephyr Metaltron, like if they Reaper these, because Metaltron is usually made through Electromite and Vortex, or Absolute, but Decode Talker you can make with anything, so I feel like that's another contingency thing. If you lose the Electromites, you still have Decode Talker. But yeah, you don't really need any other links in this deck. That's about it, honestly. For Xyz, we got Absolute, we got Naruto the Dorito, and then for rank 4s, I'm only playing 4 of them, just because I really don't have space for more. I'm playing Abyss Dweller, Nightmare, Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion, and Tornado Dragon. So Tornado Dragon is a given. You'll notice a lack of Baguska and Trapeze Magician. So Nightmare is insane. And I feel like in a lot of cases he fulfills the role that Baguska does, because Baguska is like a stalling thing, stopping your opponent from playing the game. But Nightmare does the same thing and also works with Vortex Dragon. Like, you can make Vortex Dragon and Nightmare, and that's a pain in the ass board to get over. Because, like, every monster in the deck is dark. Like, every level 4 is dark, so you never have an issue making this card. And its effect is not once per turn, so if your opponent has to get through 2 special summons and then special summon a 3rd time to break through this. And really, like, when I think of the relevant decks right now, the only ones I can think of that really would be able to easily get over Nightmare is, like, True Draco, because they don't special summon. But, like, this is a pain in the ass for Magician. This is a pain in the ass for, like, Pendulum stuff, and like Spiral. Spiral, it would depend on if they guess right with Tough, I guess. But, like, this is really good in the mirror. It's really good against, like, metal foes and shit. It would be really good against Zephyr if people start playing that. And, like, honestly, I feel like it's really good against Trickstar solely because it has 1950 defense and they can't run over it. And the way they either have to board wipe it, because if they attempt to Eater of Millions, that you just Nightmare and flip the Eater of Millions face down. So I don't know. This card seems pretty good to me. I definitely prefer it over Bagooska, and a lot of the situations where I would make Bagooska, I can just make Nightmare instead. And in that, like, the situations where I would rather make Bagooska would be ones where, like, I'm sitting on only Bagooska, but that's, like, a suboptimal play. And I'd rather have my extra deck cards be cards that are for optimal play as opposed to suboptimal. Dark Rebellion, I'm just extremely fond of this card. Because, like, it fulfills a similar role to Utopia the Lightning of beating over shit. It doesn't target, which is great. It's just like, it's a big damage card, and it does have this cute effect of battle phase to summon Supreme King stuff from your extra deck. Which I guess could come up. I'm not sure, honestly. It'd be more relevant in this than other builds. I've always just been a fan of Dark Rebellion. I feel it fulfills a very similar role to Utopia the Lightning without taking 2 slots. The only downside is that your opponent can respond to it. But yeah. And then Dweller is just because the meta is shaping up to look like there are several decks that could actually, like, crumple to Dweller. Like, True Draco's a thing. So, like, if you have this and, like, Vortex, like, True Draco, what are they going to do? And then Lightsworn is probably going to be a thing. Dinosaur is probably going to be a thing. So there's actually a good number of decks, I feel, struggle against Dweller. So against those decks where, like, I might not necessarily want to make Evilswarm Nightmare, or, like, it would just be better to make Dweller. Like, that would be great. So, like, Evilswarm Nightmare, like, the only matchup where it really seems terrible is Draco, and I have other cards to make in this place. Like, if I know I'm playing Draco, like, if my opponent's playing no cards in their extra deck, they're probably playing Draco, I can just make Dweller instead. Or I can make Bales, which is the first of the Synchro Monsters. I put this in solely because Draco is actually relevant right now, and this is just, like, an auto-win against Draco sometimes. And then the other Synchros I played were Ignister, Omega, and Clearwing. So, I mean, these are all given. You don't really need any ones. I was originally not going to play Omega because I feel like I would very rarely go into it. But this was, I feel, the better contingency plan to Reaper than Underclock Taker. Because if they, like, if you're about to make a Pendulum play, or a Electromite play and they Reaper you, you can make Underclock Taker, like this thing, and put it there and just make a play off of that. And then if they kill the Underclock Taker, you have a free extra monster zone. That honestly felt kind of weak to me. And I feel like I'd rather just do the classic play of Pendulum stuff, make Omega, banish Omega, and make something else, and just sit on Omega. So I think that's probably a better plan. So this is more of a contingency to counter Reaper. And there is a really cheeky play you could do where, like, your Electromite's banished standby phase, you can return the Reaper to graveyard, and then if Omega dies, you just return both of the extra deck. I don't think that will ever come up, but it's an option. And then the last ones are Starving Venom, which is just like utility, it copies any of these, and then Vortex Dragon for Absolute Dragon. And then side deck would be the exact same thing I showed in Zephyra, which is, I have no idea what's going on, so this is the most generic side deck ever. But yeah. This was ended up being longer than my Zephyr video, because like I said, the choices I'm making for my decks right now are very unorthodox, which is fun, because usually my builds are very standard, but I'm just, like, thinking outside of the box right now, and doing things that I think could work better, and so far, like, this is, like, the most successful I've had with, like, testing hands for Magician. Everything else, like, focusing on Wisdom Eyes and Oath Dragons just feels really clunky. Everything in this feels like it flows together tremendously. It does have a bigger weakness to Ash just because there's a focus on Pendulum Call. But other than that, like, I really like the build. I think it's great. So yeah. This is the second of 3 videos I'm going to do tonight. The last one will be Metal Foes related. So yeah, look out for that. Thanks for watching YouTube, and I'll see you next time.